Today on the show, we're answering your questions. Questions like, what are the first steps that you take when you have a brand new problem at church?
Questions like, does being in a small town change how my church should be doing social media?
This is the May 2024 Mailbag.
Let's dive in.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. We call him Reverend Rock Bottom. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello.
And today it's everyone's favorite monthly episode. We're opening up the mailbag, answering your questions. It's not Pro Church Tools. It's Church Tools.
That's right.
If you want your question answered on a future episode, throw it in the comment section below this YouTube video. You can also send us an email, hello@prochurchtools.com. Reverend Rock Bottom, take us away with the first question.
Lots of good questions today. Some great questions even. Starting off with the first one. What's your opinion on Sora's impact on church content? That is Sora, S-O-R-A. Looking at its capabilities, I could see a pastor doing a series on Noah, and for the content posted online, you could process it through Sora and make it look like he's preaching from the ark. With stuff like that in mind, again, what would your thoughts be?
So Sora is a new tool, newish tool from OpenAI. It allows you to convert text into video. So to this questioner's hypothetical, you could type in, ark with rain coming down and 2 of every animal, go. You can tell I've used Sora a bunch.
Yeah.
And then you could create a video. So now we've seen this with text to photo before. Sora is the next step, text to video. And there are some examples online that are quite impressive.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Now, Sora does still have currently, emphasis on currently, limitations. One of them is you can't reuse a scene. So if you typed in Noah's Ark, 2 of every animal with rain coming down, and you're like, oh, this is great. Okay, I want to use this again, but I just want a different angle of it for the sermon series artwork, which is going to be different than what he's actually preaching from, because the angle, you can't. There's no way that you can adjust it.
For a philosophical reason, or it's just no, we just can't do this.
That feature functionality doesn't exist yet, or at least as of 4 weeks ago when I was first exploring it. And so that presents a real limitation, right? This came out and people were like, well, so much for VFX artists. We can just create anything. We'll put it on the volume and we'll never need to film everywhere again. Except until you need to change the angle of the camera and suddenly the composition you've made has been rendered useless. So that's one thing to consider, right? You could create a single thing, but it's got to be just that single thing. Of course, this is a current problem. It is a temporary problem.
Sure.
That's not going to be a problem years down the road. More broadly, our AI policy that we recommend churches adopt, or at least consult when you're thinking about how are we going to use this new tool. Because as I just alluded to, every month, every year, a new tool is going to come out. A new feature within an existing tool is going to come out. And we have to evaluate, is this okay? Does this cross the line? There's going to be a lot of evaluation in tech, right? We talk about biggest communication shift in 500 years. It's just getting ramped up with AI. And we are going to continually have to be forced to reevaluate. How do you do that? Policy is always useful. Go back to that. That remains the thing that doesn't change while everything around you does. So we have 2 parameters. It's very simple. Parameter number 1, why are we using AI? The answer is AI can be a useful shortcut. Parameter number 2, what are our boundaries for AI? And our answer is we will not use AI as our exclusive source. So how does this policy get applied to this hypothetical? It's a little bit of a gray area because the source is the text that you wrote. And unlike writing, where AI can come up with words and claims that are demonstrably untrue, this is art. So you could look at Noah's Ark and say, I'm happy with this. And so you kind of become the arbiter of if it goes forward. So I'm still comfortable using it within this policy. Also because you could make this yourself, right? You could design it. You could have it designed.
Sure.
You could film it. Something similar, right? We've seen that done. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a great question in the context of a broader conversation about the use of these artificial intelligent tools in church. There's one part of this conversation, which is where does this fit in? Where do these tools fit in our daily lives or in our work or in our world? But it's an altogether different conversation to talk about, well, where does this fit in the ministry of Jesus? Me and Tristan were just talking about this morning, the role of AI in our lives and our work. I have a friend of mine who works in ad marketing, so Google ads, Facebook ads, and he leads a team. And actually last night he was talking on Instagram, about how often he uses ChatGPT, for example, in his work. He says he's using it like more than a handful of times a day. And one of the examples he gave was he was having he was actually a fly on a wall of a conversation going on in Slack between two of his teammates who were like trying to work out a problem. And so he copy and pasted their conversation, put it in ChatGPT and said, hey, can you propose a solution to this problem? And so he posted ChatGPT's answer to this problem. And it's pretty impressive. It was like a 6-part framework for like how to tackle this problem.
Love a framework.
You'd love that. And my friend was like, well, this is great for me as a team leader because I don't have to come to this problem from ground zero, from scratch. I have something to work from because this computer thing spit out a pretty good framework in about 0.2 seconds for me.
Sorry, HR, you are no longer needed.
Right. And so for efficiency's sake, that's great. ChatGPT did a lot of the legwork to get you started on finding a solution to this problem, which is very likely related to revenue, and in the kind of work he does, like efficiency is important. This is all good. But the other side of that coin is like, when it comes to problem solving, starting at ground zero for a problem and working through the weeds or the mud from ground zero actually forms you as a person to become a better problem solver, so that, when my 3-year-old comes to me and he's got a problem, my first instinct is not to consult ChatGPT, but it's this history that I've built in being formed by solving problems myself and not being aided by the internet.
Well, actually, I'm not going to be a problem solver anymore.
Yeah.
I'll just be a prompt solver.
Exactly.
And so long as I have the right prompt. So you're going to be living in you're in beta world,
Yes.
right? Like I'm in the actual full experience where I actually don't need to solve problems. I can export them so long as I know how to export them. That's what I'm working on.
That's right. But all of that to say, when it comes to the ministry we're doing as churches, as pastors, as communicators online of the story of Jesus, a big part of the story of Jesus and the lifelong journey of following Christ is the formation bit. It is the slow, patient ferment, Eugene Peterson would call it, a long obedience in the same direction. And AI, although it's useful for doing all sorts of menial tasks that we do throughout the day, is also really good at avoiding the formative bit of actually doing the work yourself. So when it comes to our work in churches and specifically in the ministry we do, that's a part of the conversation that we have to have with AI that you don't really have to have if you're just asking ChatGPT to write you an outline for something you're working on at work.
We got a question this week also we didn't include in the podcast here, but I answered it on Instagram at Brady Shearer. And the person said, how do you feel about a pastor writing a sermon outline using ChatGPT? And I said, well, I don't really know what you mean by writing a sermon outline. I said, do you have all the content and then you're asking ChatGPT to organize it for you?
Right.
Because I could see that use. Or are you saying write me an outline on verse and then input the verse here? Mm-hmm. That is now, it's creating source material. Mm-hmm. That would be not how I would apply the policy. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have the content, you're like, hey, could you organize this for me in ways, great. Maybe you're just great at stream of consciousness and you just spoke for 8 minutes and then use that voice recording, transcribed it, sent it to ChatGPT, and as the prompt solver that you are, asked it to organize that content. Okay, that's interesting, At least it would abide within this policy.
Yeah.
And to emphasize with all policies, just because something abides within the policy doesn't mean you must do it.
Right. Yes.
If it doesn't, it means you must not do it 99% of the time. But just because it works in the policy, so okay, value-wise, this works. And then now finally, where is our conviction level at? Mm-hmm. Where is kind of the gut check at? Where do we feel like the Holy Spirit is speaking to us? And then you can apply that kind of finally.
And there are some really innovative ways to use and integrate AI into your workflow at church. For example, taking a Sunday sermon that your pastor has preached, maybe taking his or her manuscript, putting it into ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT to make a children's lesson based off this content. That is so great for your children's ministry because now your children's ministry has the opportunity to be in sync with what's going on in big church. You're tackling the same, maybe you're going through the 23rd Psalm or something. So you get to go through it at the same time and based off the same content, but ChatGPT does a lot of that. Again, that busy work, that legwork of taking this big piece of content, a 30, 40-minute manuscript, and distilling it into, an 8-week kids program in church. That's a really great way to use these tools to make our work during the week be more efficient without it being the actual source of the ministry that we're trying to serve our church with. A conversation we're going to be having a lot for a long time, I think. How do these tools fit into our world, into our daily rhythms and certainly into our spiritual formation rhythms.
Luckily, we have a policy.
Yes. Next question. What do you do when you face a new problem? What is your thought process?
Let me tell you about a policy. The first thing I have written down here is do the work ahead of time. What are your values? So basically the exact same answer to start off as the previous one, which is like, hey, there's this new tool. How do we use it? Well, what are our values? Okay, there's this new problem. How do I approach it? How do I confront it? Well, what are our values? You have to think about what kind of person do I want to be and how do I want to handle problems? And you have to think about that now. You have to decide, okay, if a problem comes forward, when I look back on it with 2020, how do I want to say, oh, you know what? I did this, this, and this. Not just practically, but emotionally, spiritually. So that's where we've talked previously, earlier episode this year, on our non-negotiable values. You can go back through YouTube for the podcast archive and find it if you want to get like in deep to how we do the value side of things. So that's kind of like the blueprint. In the moment, I first kind of check on my physical response. So this happened to me last Monday. I get a message, it's Monday morning, and the message was from Sunday night, but I got it Monday morning. And it was one of those messages that you read and you're like, triggered. And so I'm like, okay, what am I feeling in my body? Because, and this is why this matters, and I don't want this to sound too woo-woo, like, oh, check on your body. The reason this matters is if I can detect, like, okay, my heart rate is up. Clearly my amygdala is activated. The part of my brain that's like fear, anxiety, anger, it is like going. Then what I know is true about all of humans is that I am compromised in this moment. My decision-making ability, the rational part of my brain, is being eaten up by like the fear, anxiety, anger center of my brain. Okay, so that's like saying I have a sprained ankle. Am I gonna go for a run right now? Well, no, I have a sprained ankle. I'm gonna check my body first. The exact same thing. Yeah. Why can't I go for a run right now? I want to, right, but you are compromised. You have a sprained ankle. You cannot do that. Maybe a walk or consider crutches. You can still get through it. So I didn't have a sprained ankle in this case, but I went for an actual walk. So what I did was I was having this physical response, so I removed myself from the situation and physically changed what was happening. I gave it an hour on this walk, and then I sat down again to write through what I was going to say in response. So this specific problem was like, okay, here's this message that comes in, I need to provide a response. At that point, I was no longer worked up. I was no longer compromised. I was in a clean and clear headspace. And what did I do first? I wrote an angry response and then deleted it. I find this incredibly cathartic. Everything that I want to say, everything that I'm feeling that's like not aligned with my values. This is not who I want to be. I write it and I delete it. I don't always do this, but in this case I did. And I wrote a message that was like, well, here's why you did it, and this is your, and I wrote it back and I was like, we need to come to a conclusion. And I finessed it. And I was like, okay, that's more aligned with my values. So now I'm physically in the right space. And then finally what I do, and the walk really helped with this in this specific occasion, but even just going to a different room, breathing, taking a 5-minute break can be just as impactful, is I reassess from altitude. Okay, now I'm not like in the mud with my feelings on this. I can remove the emotion from the equation. Okay, values-wise, reassessing from altitude, how do I want to handle this? The key is basically just hijacking the part of your brain that's hijacking you in the moment and not letting it dictate how you respond. Because you want to respond, you don't want to react.
We employ this a lot in our parenting as well. We're parenting a 3-year-old. For anyone who has not just parented a 3-year-old, but spent time around a 3-year-old for any length of time, you just know that they're like not the most rational creatures. And that makes sense because these parts of their physiological selves, their bodies, their brains are not fully formed yet. And so they just get set off and overreact and underreact in some cases to like just the most outlandish things. So we have this policy in our house is that we will not discipline if the child is dysregulated or if I'm dysregulated, because that's coming if I'm trying to discipline, bring a rational consequence or something to a child who is dysregulated, that's falling on proverbial deaf ears because they're activated in the amygdala sense. They are not online, right? Their rational brain is not online. So it's not profitable to try and discipline in that moment. It will be later, but we have to come down from that first. But it also works in the inverse. If I'm dysregulated, if I'm feeling frustrated or angry or sad or anxious, I I can't be responsible for, dishing out appropriate rational discipline in that type of moment either. So I have a responsibility to myself. And so I just say that to affirm what you're saying about, because when I read this question, that was my first instinct as well. It's like, oh, when a problem occurs, whether it's at work or home or whatever, like it's imperative that we check in with we know that feeling of not just the increased heart rate, but like your body starts to feel a little warm, like you start to feel a little bit hot. Yeah. And it's like, that's not bad. Like the feeling is fine. It's valid, but you just have to tend to it first so that you can respond to what's happening as opposed to reacting to it. So it just takes a little bit of mindfulness. It takes a lot of practice. But you end up on the other side of practicing that to the point where you've become formed by it. It's now your instinct when you do get activated to like take pause and not react. You just turn into a better problem solver. You turn into a better boss, a better parent, a better friend, a better pastor, better employee, better employer, because you're just bringing a better version of yourself to the table when it's time to come to the table and actually solve a problem.
And this really speaks to the importance of policy, because Alex has a 3-year-old and a not 1-year-old. I have a 9-year-old and a 2-year-old. And the 2-year-old is starting to do 3-year-old things. Like they're just getting into that age. And my precious baby girl, who has been like the perfect child to this point, she's starting to whine about things when she doesn't get her way. And I'm like, oh no. And what's crazy is I'm remembering what happened with our first. The problem is, it's the age gap between these two has been delightful in every way. One of the downsides is I'm kind of sometimes disciplining the 9-year-old like the 2-year-old and the 2-year-old like the 9-year-old. I'm like, all right, they're like very, very different in their ability to process information and manage their own emotions. I was talking with my wife yesterday and was like, hey, you know what? We just keep trying your best. You really did a good job in this moment. She brought herself out of like a dysregulated state and then spoke calmly to the child who was aggravating us, to the 9-year-old. And I affirmed her in that. But we don't have a policy for this. And so like, as soon as Alex said that, I was like, intuitively, that's what I'm grasping at,
Right.
but we don't have shared language. And so I'm going to steal that policy from him.
it.
And I am going to implement it and forget.
Every policy around here is free.
Again, absolutely. Policy, value, rule for life, principle, philosophy, standard, whatever you want to call it. And now that's actually going to allow us to live that out better because we'll have shared language over it. There's clarity. There is boundaries to what we will do and what we won't do. And that will give us the chance to practice the formation to become better. I played basketball as a kid. One of my coaches, always remember what she said. She said, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. She means it's like, if you practice a bad jump shot, you don't get better, you'll just get worse at being bad, which would be better. You'll get better at being bad, which would be worse.
Yes.
The point is, if my wife and I keep practicing this without shared language, we're not going to actually be practicing it in its fullness as well as we could. Alex talked about formation. So we're not actually like getting down that formation path as quickly as we would if we just had shared language and then could affirm the other person, could challenge the other person, and we're just like, we're on the same page. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, all policies are free around here. That's a new tagline for show.
That's the policy for the policy?
Yes.
All policies are free.
Exactly. Next question. Hey, I'm a new social media manager at a mid-sized church. Since starting, I've increased our posting frequency on all platforms by quite a bit, so that we're now posting just a touch less than the major churches in our area. My question is, what sort of recommendations do you have regarding backup posts or posts that are prepared and ready to go in case of an emergency and I'm unable to create additional content for some time? Obviously, there's some difference in our church's case because I'm the only person making content, where a church like Elevation has a team of people in case one person has an emergency.
So I first heard this term from a buddy of mine, Nick Goodner, Creative Church. The idea of a rainy day fund for content or an emergency fund for content. And I remember hearing that, being struck by it, being like, that is a genius idea.
Yeah.
Because what happens is we know that for success on social to be achieved, we have to commit to the rhythm of no weeks off. Well, what happens when you're not able to create content in a given week? It's imperative that you do no weeks off. So you have to have a rainy day fund or an emergency fund or some type of backup plan for when the unexpected happens. The same with the budget. Well, the mortgage gets taken out on the first. So payroll in the business gets taken out on the first. you also have a no weeks off policy with your bank.
Right.
Except it's no months off.
Yes.
And so if you don't have a fix for that, like we made some accounting changes in our business this past month. Some accountants were, hey, we want to basically just like close the books at a different time per month. To get there, you basically need to not take any money for a full 30-day period. And then you can resume as normal. And then we can even like backload it, but you just need to float for 30 days. So I was like, okay, well, we have a rainy day fund. We just borrow from that, and then we pay it right back once like the accounting is closed at the different time of the month. So the same can be true for your content schedule. Now, I'll be honest, I have yet to do this because like I'm putting all my effort into content creation. The thought of like making content and then just banking it, it's like, well, that's a lot of creative effort. And yet, when I set my goals at the beginning of the year, it was like, okay, this much, I post every single week on YouTube, and except for 2 weeks, because Christmas. Well, I'm already like a week or two behind on YouTube, so I made a commitment, and I've been very good with it. But there were a couple things that came up that I couldn't have foreseen, and we had one backup piece of content on YouTube, so we used it. Apparently, I needed 3 instead of 1, and so this is something that we can all work to do. The key is the content cannot be timely in any way. Right. Not as big of a problem for churches because like. We're talking from the Bible, which,
it's timeless.
Right. So you're good there. If I'm doing spring 2024 trends, and then that...
You can't put that one in the bank.
That's not in the bank. Yeah. So you have to find stuff in the bank that is timeless. And then one more word of encouragement here, practical, is if you've been doing this for a while, you can reuse content. So I published a post today, and it was... a carousel. Best times for churches to post on social media. It's going to get thousands of likes. Why? Because the last time I posted it, it got thousands of likes.
Right.
All I did was update the times based on some new research, but I published a post last week, another carousel, why churches fail to develop volunteers. 6,000 likes. I knew it was going to get a ton of likes because last time I posted the identical post called Why Churches Fail to Develop Volunteers, it got 5,000 likes.
Identical creative as well, or just copy?
Not identical creative because in the last time we hadn't done the new brand.
Okay.
But like identical bold carousel styling. Right. It just had like a different color background. Yeah. So like virtually identical. So yeah, it was green.
Yeah.
It was green last time.
Yeah.
But then this time it was red.
Well, and this is related to the social era we're living in right now. We talk about this almost every time we turn these mics on. Is we're living online in a discovery era where whatever you post today has an opportunity to reach a brand new audience every time you post it, which was not true of a social graph area where it was predominantly being delivered to your followers. And so in a social graph era, reposting content was not just a little bit of a faux pas, but was like redundant to the point of being a little bit useless because you're posting the same content to the same people. But for any of us who take any time looking through our Instagram insights, for example, when we post content, we're predominantly reaching new people every time we post. And a very small portion of that little pie graph is actually folks who follow us. So there's actually no harm in you posting identical content. I don't know how many, that was a few months ago, that post. So like not
6 months is about what I do.
So not from what you posted last week, but I've been doing that as well. Like on my little coffee blog online, there's some posts that I'm really proud of, like the copy, because I write like long captions, like mini blogs sort of.
Are you really proud of the one that went viral?
No, I don't want to talk about that. And so I've been doing that. I've just been like reaching back like way into my archive, finding posts that I worked hard on, that I'm proud of, and just posting that copy again with new creative. There's no harm in that now in this discovery era. So that's a great way to you're not cheating a rainy day fund, but like to build it up without doing a whole lot of new work there.
I love that.
Okay, next question. Besides solving problems, because it sounds like you've got that under control, what's the hardest thing about entrepreneurship?
So on the same day this question came in, I saw a post come across my Twitter feed that said, the hardest thing about entrepreneurship is not having anyone to call. And I could not disagree more. I, for me, have never thought that once. And I think there's a few reasons for this. One, I have a very strong support group of friends and family. And they're quite good at allowing me to basically share all my feelings and then get to work solving it, which is kind of a unique dynamic. Like the best example of this is my wife. So she'll be like, what's wrong? And I'll be like, well,
I got this message on Monday morning.
Like duh. And she's like, oh yeah. Yeah. And like, she'll just let me like get the feelings out, catharsis. And then she'll be like, well, now you can solve it. Like, she's like, I can't solve it.
Yeah, right.
What do you think I can do? Like, you go do that.
Yeah.
Same around the office sometimes. Well, you'll have like a Brady therapy hour where I'm like, all right, Monday meeting on a Wednesday. And we'll get through our things. And I'm like, and then this happened. And then, can you believe it? And everyone's like, yeah, that does sound hard. Anyway, go solve it now. So that's a fun dynamic.
Yeah.
But, less glibly, one of the things that I said to my mom right before she passed, which was, I'm mid to late 20s. I was like, Mom, this is awful. I'm going to miss you. Wish this wasn't happening. But I feel like you have prepared me for what I need to do. Like, I'm ready to take the mantle. And the mantle that she had was like, she was always the emotional heartbeat of the family and like the spiritual heartbeat of the family. And so I was like, I'm ready to carry that mantle for my own family. And so she prepared me. And I feel like when I'm like in a problem where I don't know how to fix it, like I can lean on all the wisdom that she like imparted to me. But then there's also just the faith aspect, right? Like a huge part of what she imparted to me was my faith. And so I have Jesus to talk to. I have God to talk to. Like I don't have nobody to call. So I've never felt that. The hardest part for me is the weight of people counting on you and like just knowing the stakes as the company gets bigger and we reach more people, or even just like the weight of knowing how many people you're influencing. Like, this isn't like the perfect metric for it, but it is one of the ways that comes through clearly. Like, I'll publish something, and then a pastor who has like a really big church, who's older than me, that I've like looked up to since my teens, will like the post and comment. And I'll be like, every time that happens, it's a bit strange. Because she's like, you saw that? Like, oh, right. Like, there's 105,000 people on this account. There's 145,000 subscribers on this account. Like, there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Those numbers don't really mean anything because you just see 105K. Ooh, last week it was 104K. Sweet, that's upward. Great. It's hard to contextualize what it actually means. And so like that weight can be challenging sometimes. The other part is resisting savior complex. Specifically in the sense of I have the ability a lot of the times to like solve people's problems. You can throw money at something. You can be really gracious with someone. You can afford them, extra time to do this or that. And then same personally, right? Like, oh, money will make this problem go away. Or I have a lot of free time. Free time will make this go away. And what happens is the more, this has been happening since I was like 21. So the more that you're able to do this, the more you become the source of the problem, of like the solution, not God, right? Like I am at the center of this. And so the challenge is reminding yourself like, okay, I am the steward. Okay, Lord of the Rings. I am the steward of Gondor. And I don't want to become a bad steward that sends his son Faramir off to be killed and then gets lit on fire and jumps off the top of the building. You remember that part?
I do.
I am not Aragorn. I am not the king who will one day return. That's not me. I am steward, keeping this place hopefully running because I'm not the ultimate authority. But in the day-to-day, you become the person that solves the problems. You have the ability to like decide yes or no, and someone's X, Y, or Z then is affected by that. And what happens is anytime I've seen someone in discomfort, anytime I'm like, I can fix that. And you just start to wanting to like do that all the time because you're like, well, I could fix it. Maybe someone else can't, but I could. Do I not have the responsibility to do it? So it's like this noble motivation that then can be twisted if you put yourself in the place where Jesus belongs.
So how do you navigate that, those pressures, specifically the resisting the savior complex? Like how are you stewarding that? What is your effort to steward that well?
Allow me to introduce you to a policy. But seriously, the values that we talked about on that other episode, those values exist as like an anchor for my soul and an anchor for my behavior, because otherwise you'll just end up justifying whatever you're doing and saying, well, look, here's why that's actually okay. And every time a different problem comes up, you could justify it for a different reason. Like, believe me, I can convince myself just as much as I can convince you that a social strategy is going to be effective. And so I can make justifications to myself, to my wife, to my kids, to my employees, to my God, and say like, hey, well, actually, you see what I did there? That's why it's a good thing. All the while, there's this moving target. And so the values, again, provide this immovable object to which you have to evaluate your behavior, choices, and attitude by. And if you're not living up to that, then the sober response is to say, okay, I need to change. Sometimes the values need to change. They're not perfect either, right? Like, they're not scripture. And so that's why we also have, the ancient wisdom of the Bible that is unchanging and timeless, and we can go to. And that's why every single value is rooted in scripture. But, I could probably fudge that too if I wanted to, right? Famously, interpretations of scriptures vary.
Yes, I can imagine it's tough. Like, as an entrepreneur, in the role of CEO, owner, operator, is that problem solving, being the final voice, the arbitrator of yes and no. That's actually kind of baked into the role a little bit. Like, the buck has to stop with someone. And so you've actually done a good job. Just recently, we made a revision to our values, and you made like a charge to us as a team to grow in our problem solving skills. And I think that alleviates some of the burden from you. It encourages us, it charges us to bring a solution to the table when there is a problem first, as opposed to just looking to the boss man or the savior in the context of what we're talking about here to solve the problem because it's his job. So like you said, values it's a living document. And so making some changes there, I think has been good for you and good for us too. So,
yeah. The nice thing about the savior complex side of things is like, we have like really great friends and support group around us. Nobody that is like, we don't live in a metro area, and we didn't like fall in with like the rich crowd.
Right.
And then suddenly now it's like, you're around people who all they care about is appearance, and all they care about is success, and like flaunting that and letting everyone know like how like we've just been friends with the same people for like 15 years. And like a bunch of them moved here when I was broke and said, yeah, we trust you to do this. My wife chose me when I was a pimply 18-year-old, and like she had to work 2 jobs because I couldn't even give her like $1 in the budget. She was the budget. So when you come from like those humble beginnings, like everyone still remembers who. Like, that's still just Cole.
I know.
Before I was Brady.
The old Facebook pictures, they pop up in Slack every once in a while just to keep everyone sober minded and humble.
So that helps. Like, you're just with the people the whole time. Like they know who you are, and they've seen you at your worst, and they've seen you at your best, and so they like challenge you to be your best, and they believe in that. But they also like are aware of like your humanity, and that's why we all kind of lean on God.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, moving on next. I have a volunteer leading a social team for our youth account, and it's in capital letters here, blowing up. Do we just sit in gratitude for this reach, or how do we transition to discipline Gen Z through Instagram?
I believe that's disciple. Gen Z is what they meant to say.
Yes. How do we transition? I was wondering, what do you want to do to Gen Z? How do we transition to disciple Gen Z through Instagram? Do we collab the youth reels with our main church? We are leaning that way. We're sitting about 9,000 followers on the main church account, and our average in-person attendance is about 750.
So I checked the youth account. It's got 38,000 followers.
So yeah, it's capital letters blowing up.
And it was and is a perfect example of student-led social media. You can find it, We Are Amplify Youth. It really reminded me of, there are a bunch of youth accounts that are doing great work similar to this, where you can tell student-led social media, which is why it's doing well.
Yeah.
It reminded me of when I was in youth making videos. This is pre-social media, but like we had a camcorder and we would do video announcements for youth. And it'd be like, come to youth this Friday. We're going to have laser tag, and now I'm going to jump over this bush. And then you get caught. No, you were not going to jump over that bush. You tried, it was too tall. And now you're like, then they zoom in. Just having fun. And people love those because it's like youth doing things. And so your peers are doing things, and you're like, this is all fun. So collabs are tricky, but I do think they're worth experimentation. Sometimes we see churches dabble in them and reach declines. Other times we see it's, raising tide sort of thing, lifts both accounts. So worth experimenting with. I'd probably put a 90-day bracket on the experimentation. Because what we do know, like in a ministry sense, is that vibrant youth groups are one of like the catalysts for a growing church.
Yep.
If you want to know more about this, checking out the Growing Young book and the podcast that we did with Kara Powell at the end of last year.
Oh, it's so good.
And
She said it. She said, by all their metrics, growing churches are the ones that disproportionately prioritize young people in their church.
And what we know is when you have that like vibrant young energy in the church, older generations, like they really thrive off that because it's not just this country club for this like aging congregation, but there's this multi-generational element to ministry, which is what it's meant to be at its best. And you can see it when you look around in the sanctuary. So we talk about congruency between in-person and online. Might that phenomenon also translate to online? I think that's definitely a hypothesis that's worth exploring. So I would put a 90-day bracket kind of on the experiment, do the collaborations, and see what happens when this youth content crosses over to the church content. My church growing up, we were about 300, so this church of 750 is a bit bigger, but we had this really vibrant youth group of like 50 to 60 people, which was like disproportionately larger than what you'd expect for a church of our size. And I remember like how much vitality that brought to the church. I didn't really think of it at that time because I was just in youth group, but like in retrospect, you're like, oh wow, that was something that was really special. So can we replicate that online? I think it's a worthwhile hypothesis. I'd explore it. If after 90 days you're like, yeah, we tried it, we gave it a ton of opportunities and it didn't really see much, then you quit it. If after the 90 days you're like, look at what we've learned, take those lessons and apply them going forward.
Yeah. And if it doesn't work, to the question for disciplining Gen Z, you have this account with 38,000 followers, presumably more by then at the end of 90 days. So you have an established account with a large audience. Now you have an opportunity to create a social strategy to disciple Gen Z online through this page. So it's a win-win.
And if you want to discipline them, go for it.
Yeah, just keep us out of it.
So it's true. Every time you try to type disciple, Siri's like, never heard of it.
Next question. What would you say to Christians who lack critical thinking and cloak it in spiritual language?
Yeah, I think this question was asked with a bit of snark behind it. So, weaponizing scripture to control and manipulate others is probably one of my least favorite things on earth. Because it uses something that's so pure and beautiful in a really ugly way, which is probably like the worst part of it. Right. This stuff gets really tricky. So I'm just going to tell you how I tried to do it. I'm not telling you need to do it like me. This is how I've done it. For some background, I grew up in a Baptist church, really small, Canadian Baptist church, 8 people, no microphones. We did worship with an acoustic guitar. Pastor spoke from the pulpit, just his voice. In high school, I started going to a Pentecostal youth group. And that's like the first time like I fall in love with church. I find people that accept me for who I am. I commit my life to Jesus in a real way. I was a Christian before that, but like I didn't really know too much about what that meant for my like adulthood. Oh, okay, it was clear. That changes the trajectory of my life. At that same time, I go from a denomination that says women cannot be pastors to a church that like had pastors in the denomination. I didn't really think of it much as a kid, but like 2 churches that held very differently. Then I get to Bible college in my denomination. And one of the distinctives that all denominations have in ours was, if you don't speak in tongues, you cannot be ordained. And I was like, that's strange. Anyone else find this strange? Anyone else? And people were like, yeah, it's kind of strange. It's like, okay. And the more that I spent time in the church world, first pursuing the pastorate, I can speak in tongues, by the way, so that was not the reason.
The reason is you wouldn't stop drinking.
Well, right. That's right. And you also can't have any water. Like, wait, what?
Everyone else find this weird?
Okay, I will never name the name of this professor. They are safe with me, but I will never forget the one time, and I went to many professors' houses. One time I went to a professor's house, and he opens the cabinet.
It's a full liquor cabinet.
He's like, want a glass of wine? I was like, what? He's like, listen, man. I was like, I knew it. And so these distinctives get elevated to the place of like major status, right? there's a saying, we don't want to major on the minors. But what some people will say is, I'm not majoring on the minors because my interpretation of scripture leads me to believe this. And if you're saying that the proper interpretation and application of scripture is a minor, then you and I will never agree. I'm like, okay, I understand the sentiment behind that, but if we look at all of Christian history, we can see people much smarter than you and I that have done all the work have still come on the opposite sides of the camps. And this happened recently on a post of ours that I expected to be a bit innocuous.
Oh, geez.
I was like, hey, here's a church that's reaching Gen Z. And they meet in this non-traditional space, and they have a female lead pastor, and they have an emphasis on community and working with partnerships in the organization. And they don't have like a ton of heavy programming. So they're doing a bunch of different things. And they're like, majority Gen Z. And people were like, this is not a church. And I was like, in good faith, why? Because I was like, I feel like there are a couple of reasons here. You could say one, well, their programming doesn't look like every other church. So like maybe they're going to say, you're not doing communion, which this church is, but like, make a claim that the programming doesn't align with actual church. They could say, you can't have a church that's this many like young people. Like if a church is just that single generation, it's not really a church. And a couple people said that, a bunch. And I was like, well, okay, but like, can we keep that same energy for the 100 or 1,000 times more congregations that are just like only seniors? Because that's the problem. The problem is not, oh my goodness, there's too many churches with only young people. It's not a problem. Third, woman lead pastor. Fourth, there's another thing I can't remember. Anyway, I've never seen the response to this, but people were losing their minds over a woman pastor.
It was not a good comment section to be in.
And they weren't just saying like, oh, I disagree with that. They're like, that is not a church. Right. Stop calling it a church. It's unbiblical. You can call it whatever you want. Oh, I play basketball with my friends. It's a church. If the female is a pastor and they are the lead, it is not a church. I was like, I should probably learn my lesson, but like I did not expect that. I did not anticipate that. I didn't see it coming. And so this is how I do things, okay? Like I like the Apostles' Creed. I memorized it when I was a kid. You want to substitute the Nicene Creed? I think Alex would. Probably better. I memorized the Apostles when I was a kid. And I memorized it in the Baptist church. And I spoke in tongues in the Pentecostal church.
Amazing.
And I chose not to pursue the pastorate, not because of speaking in tongues, but because I did not have the relational bandwidth. And I still wanted to work with churches, and here we are today.
I actually prefer the Apostles' Creed.
Really?
Yeah. The line that gets me is the confession that Jesus descended into hell.
Yes.
That gets omitted in a lot of like, either omitted in other Christian confessions and creeds or just like blown over in the Apostles' Creed. And like on Easter Sunday, we recited the Apostles' Creed at church. And I just wanted to like, do you guys see what you just read, that we believe he descended into hell? Like that, what he was up to on Saturday really means something? Anyway, so I prefer the Apostles' Creed.
I also profess the Universal Catholic Church.
The first time we recited the Apostles' Creed at church, we got a real stern talking to from an older woman in our church who said, I have some concerns. We said something about the Catholic Church on Sunday, and I'd like to know more about what you believe about the Catholic Church.
Well, look, that's
I was happy to have that conversation.
A great posture to have. This was interesting. Can you tell me more? So my approach is always like, look, I believe in the Apostles' Creed. I think that makes me a Christian, historically.
Right.
Do you? Cool. No, I don't care. But if I'm going to bring a church on, if I'm going to highlight a church and I believe that, then like I'm going to highlight them. Because guess what? Every single church that we highlight has a problem with their theology. What is it? That's the thing. We probably don't know.
Up to the comment section to decide.
Because every church is someone else's heretic, and every believer is someone else's heretic. And I get that like that statement on its own is not perfect. It's problematic because you could say, right, so we're just not going to try? I'm like, no. Like, go after your convictions. Believe in them. But like, if we get to the point where we're just like, yeah, but like, my interpretation is right, and I'm 100% confident in it, on these minor issues, personally, and this is what I'm just saying, this is what I do, I don't know how you can square that, because it has a pretty big level of naivety and arrogance to say like, look, I understand that for thousands of years, people have killed each other over how we're going to interpret this document, but in 2024, I'm in my third year now, Bible college, don't know if you knew that, and I figured it out. I got it. I could share it with you.
Yeah. Listen, for me, I don't know what my perspective on this would be if I wasn't a pastor, but because I'm pastoring people, and that just brings on a different complexion on how I perceive people and how I relate to them. this inspires a bit of compassion for me, folks who lack critical thinking or who will actually encourage people not to be critical thinkers and use spiritual language to kind of skirt around that or fluff it up. To the first question or the second question, talking about being like triggered or like activated amygdalas, I'm a very like critical thinking type person. So when folks come to theological questions or arenas with a lack of critical thinking, I get triggered right away. But I'm learning and I'm growing, I'm being formed. My compassion kind of follows it closely from behind, because in the church, we actually have this long history of discouraging folks from being critical thinkers and cloaking that in spiritual language. When I was mulling over this question, getting ready for the podcast, I was thinking about just like how the scriptures have been distributed over the course of Christian history. Like in the intro of the show, we talk about we're navigating the biggest communication shift in the last 500 years. Well, that communication shift was the invent of the printing press. And that caused some real problems for some pretty large churches who didn't want lay people to have the scriptures in their own possession.
Universal Catholic Church?
Well, yes. No, that was just the Catholic Church, capital C, yeah, not lowercase c. But like, there were hundreds of years where people were, to what you said, fighting and killing each other over not translating the scriptures into vernacular languages because they were afraid that if people could read the scriptures for themselves, they would have more heresies to deal with. And that's a valid concern. But the way that they tackled it was like, no, we actually don't want you to think about this for yourself. We want you to just come to mass, come to church, receive from the priest, and then just go home. And we have this long history of actually discouraging critical thinking amongst Christian communities because it gets a little bit messy, to what you're saying, when we hold all of the things that aren't the majors, but we hold all the minors with open hands. You know, even the way we structure our Sunday services, and my church is not immune from this, but having a monologue as most of the Sunday service from 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people on a rotation for the entire year, that doesn't inspire a whole lot of critical thinking. That is like, receive what the pastor, the priest has to say and take it as truth. And so in our Christian community, so now I will make an example of how we're making an effort to combat this. We're trying to create a place where we can not discourage critical thinking, but encourage it in a fruitful way. So that does not look like passing the microphone to everyone in the room every week to hear what everyone has to say. But it does look like devoting some of our Sunday gathering time to opening it up to group conversation and asking questions together, answering questions together. It looks like on our beliefs page, having the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, and not having any of the minors listed there because we're holding them with open hands. And so for me, I feel a little bit of compassion because throughout church history, we have this quite actually long lineage of discouraging critical thinking because it gets a little bit messy. And so I think in response, my role as a pastor, just simply as a person of faith, is to create safe spaces, whether it's in church or in my home or in my friendships, to inspire and encourage critical thinking and say, like, you know what? We actually can talk about this plainly. We can dare to be wrong about something, as opposed to like just using spiritual language to make it sound safe, make it sound good, and just moving along from there.
Final word I'll say on this is that I spent a considerable part of my 15 to 25-year-old decade reading theology books, diving so deep into the nuances of every part of Scripture and the Christian faith. Famously, in my own friend group, in the 11th grade, I had Wayne Grudem's Theology 101.
So
like
good.
Before Bible college, like I was buying these things recreationally. That's how much of a sicko that I was, because I knew I wanted to be a pastor early. But then I couldn't speak in tongues. I don't know if you heard about this. And I got to like the end of that decade, and I was like, what fruit has come from this? Because I do feel like that's how I should be evaluating this. Like, am I growing in my love of neighbor? Am I growing in my love of God? Am I growing in my understanding of God? I honestly didn't think I was. And so at this point, and I'm not suggesting this should be how it is for everyone. In fact, there are many people that it shouldn't be this way for. Like, I hold fast to the doctrines in like the Apostles' Creed, like the basics. Everything else, I don't really have much interest in. Because for me, it wasn't leading me to become more like Jesus. And that could change in another decade. It's only been about 1 decade since that previous decade. And it's been so much more freeing because I've been able to actually like be formed more like Jesus because I haven't been like so deep in the minutia of like different translations and interpretations of things that, again, like didn't help me do the thing that I claim to believe in the most. And so maybe that's a reflection on me, an inability to keep the minors minor. I like kept elevating them because if I couldn't get an answer, I just would focus more on it. And the more that I focused on it, the more that I elevated it, the more that it actually took the place that the major should have been in the first place. So for me, I had to let that go, which is why you'll see us platform a progressive church. You'll see us platform a conservative church. You'll see us platform a non-American church that does things dramatically different than the North American church does. You'll see us platform a mega church. You'll see us platform a small church. Old church, young church, different ethnicities of church. Because I'm like, as far as I can tell, they all ascribe to the Apostles' Creed. Look, they're doing this that I think is cool. That's not me unilaterally saying everything this church does must be copied.
Right.
And that's where, come on, we got to be able to parse things a little bit better than that. But I think Alex is making a great point. Again, thank you.
Yeah.
About I need to develop more in my compassion. Because I get into my analytical bag and I go, all right, you want to play? You want to tango? And that's not the right spirit. And I would say that happens about 10% of the time right now, but like I should be working to get that closer to 1%.
But you're so right. If we don't believe the same things we believed 10 years ago, why on earth do I believe that 10 years from now, I'm going to believe exactly how I believe today?
That's the thing, right? Like,
which is so funny because what I believe today, I feel like so secure in. And surely like,
it's not as volatile.
Yes, like as we age, you reach some form of like spiritual maturity where you're not like you're not just like blowing in the wind. But like, yeah, I just can't be naive to believe that like 10 years from now, I'm not going to have I'm not going to grow in a way spiritually that I'm not going to have different opinions on some of these things.
That's what I tried to say to some of the people in the comments. I was like, have you ever believed differently than now? Like, of course. I was like, so might you believe differently in the future? Like, no. Now I have it right. I was like, you might, but like, can we at least hold that a little bit more?
I'm 22. I have it figured out. Okay?
33. I have it all figured out.
Third year of Bible college. Got a question about sharing sermon clips. Well, good, because we talk a lot about that. I've been following your advice for pulling interesting snippets from already recorded sermons, and they turn out decently well. But I've noticed from some of the great examples that you share, there are usually multiple camera angles and interesting footage because someone is clearly directing behind the scenes. At my church, it's just me, VMX, and a camera. I don't have an easy way to get multiple interesting shots. So do you think that matters? And if so, any suggestions for how I can use better what I have? I'm working on building a media team, so I may have more options in the future.
Was that BMX? Was that DMX? Was it VMX? I think it's VMix.
VMix. Just me, VMix, and a camera.
Just to be clear. Do I think it matters? No, I don't think it matters. If you look at my reels, it's just a static camera shot. And I do a lot of editing on top of that, but when it's filmed, it's just me sitting at a table with a camera that's flat. Here's the thing. If you are cropping from a horizontal canvas to a vertical canvas, so long as your pastor isn't literally standing at the pulpit, never moving, there's already going to be a lot of movement to the shot as the AI tracks your pastor as he or she moves through the frame, because you can't keep them contained in the frame if you crop it from horizontal to vertical, because you're losing so much of the horizontal canvas. So now that single camera shot that you might think is pretty static, and maybe on its own it is, now it's a little bit more dynamic because it's moving. The other thing is it's a 30 to 90 second clip. So you're not going to need so much variety in those 30 to 90 seconds. It's not like we're watching a 40-minute thing and it's like, this can get a little bit stale. That time is short enough. There are things that you can do on top of this, though. Like, you do not need to add 2 more camera angles and have like a switcher and bring on more people on the volunteer team. You can punch in and punch out from the clip that you already have. We gain a lot more flexibility when we take a recorded sermon that might not have the perfect resolution and then publish it on a phone, because the phone's real estate is that much smaller than the computer. And so what might look is like, I'm losing quality here. When it gets shrunk down to the mobile device, you've got a lot more room and flexibility. So you can punch in, you can punch out. If you feel like you want to cut the sermon up, if you want to remove some of the silences, that's a part that often gets overlooked that I think matters more, the cadence and pacing of the preacher speaking. Because the cadence and pacing of preaching live to a room is very different from social media. It's kind of the equivalent of like if you're listening to a podcast on 1.5 speed and then you drop it down to 1 speed, like that's normal. but it sounds slow relative to what we're used to. And so what can make a difference, not the camera angle, what can make a difference is if like your preaching cadence is so much slower than everything else that a person has just scrolled through on social and will scroll to after your post. And so now they're swiping past because they're like, man, this is just the slowest thing ever. And so we remove silences when we edit. We will cut things up to make them more snappy because that is the cadence that translates best to social media.
Yeah.
And isn't that how it always goes with video? Yeah. We focus so much on the video side and we forget about the audio side. Another thing that you can do, a little Ken Burns zoom. This is the very slow zoom that you ramp very slowly, very slowly. You're still zooming. Oh, are we zooming right now? Oh, a little bit of movement that I didn't detect until just now. B-roll can also be added in post. So many options for you. Pick and choose some of these, combine them. Options for you that are beyond, oh, I'm going to radically change my live stream setup, or I'm just going to abandon this approach to social clips altogether because we don't have the setup that you need to perform well.
And all in all, like it's the content of the post, the content of the sermon clip that you're posting is what matters, right? So that 3-second hook at the beginning, that one line or that 2 lines that's going to pop up later in the video to grab your user, your followers' attention, the folks who are finding you on Instagram or Facebook Reels or YouTube Shorts, wherever they're finding you. It's those first few words, those first few sentences that hook you in, that capture the viewer's attention, and all those other video editing tips and tactics are great to maintain the attention. But if you can't get someone's attention in the first place, 10 camera angles isn't going to help that either.
100%. Hook is what's going to drive 80% of the performance.
Okay, Braid, it's that time of year. Quickly approaching summertime. And the question is, what's going to be your summer fragrance this year, the year of our Lord 2024?
Okay, so let's talk about the summer rotation. What is my fragrance policy? What are my values? I am looking for 3 things. I'm looking for masculine, I'm looking for longevity, and I'm looking for modern. The masculine one is pretty straightforward, though I will dip into a neutral fragrance. Most of mine are going to skew more to the masculine side. Longevity. This is especially important in summertime. Summertime, we often call those types of fragrances freshies. Okay. A freshie uses different ingredients and substances relative to a cold weather fragrance, and those substances just don't have the same staying power. So famously, there are so many great smelling warm weather fragrances that just don't stick around. You spray it, it's there for seconds, and it's gone. Whereas you'll have these like winter cold weather fragrances that are like cinnamon and caramel and oud and these like really long lasting smells. You're like, don't spray those the same way you spray a summer one, or else you're gonna take some people out. And then modern. I don't want to be smelling like my grandfather or like someone that's that many generations before. It's just like there were just different styles then, and those styles don't relate to me as well. So let's talk about what's in the summer rotation. First, Roja Elysium.
You've secured all these. They're in the bag.
Yeah, and the bottom 2 are kind of my 2 favorites. These are kind of the new guys on the block.
All right.
So Roja Elysium, this is kind of my everyday. It doesn't have outstanding staying power, but it's pretty good. It's charismatic. It's very fizzy. It's sparkling. Some people say it's kind of like spraying root beer or like Coca-Cola on you. Like that same effervescence. It does not smell like root beer.
Right.
But that same effervescence. Second one is Creed Silver Mountain Water. This is, it's a bit inky. I liken it to a freshly ironed white t-shirt. Very nice. Xerjoff Torino 21. This is European summer. Okay, I'm in Italy. Maybe I'm on the Amalfi Coast.
Are you going to Europe this summer?
This fall.
Okay.
Technically summer, because it's in September.
Late summer.
Yeah. Yeah. Scandinavia. Little Copenhagen, little Stockholm, little Oslo, little Amsterdam. 4 new countries, excited. The Xerjoff Torino 21. This is named after the tennis tournament in Torino.
Okay.
And this is the one from 21. I believe there's one from 22, 23.
Cool.
21 is my favorite. Mint, lemon, basil, Dolce & Gabbana, light blue forever. This is going to be the most affordable.
We've talked about this one before.
On the list. So light blue is a very famous Dolce & Gabbana fragrance. Forever is one of the flankers. To remind everyone, a flanker is like a remix on an existing fragrance. So you have like the baseline, You have Coke. Oh, this is cherry Coke. Ooh, interesting. So light blue forever. Sometimes it's a unique take or a slightly different take on the original fragrance. Other times, if it's a really popular fragrance line, it could be a completely different smelling fragrance that the manufacturer, the perfume brand, was like, well, let's leverage this name everybody already knows because we'll make more money if we call this Dior Sauvage Forever rather than calling it like Dior Forever on its own. Everyone knows Sauvage, so let's like build off of that reputation. Forever, light blue Forever is similar to light blue. It has a very authentic, genuine grapefruit note, and then it's a bit musky. So pretty delightful and about as good as you're going to get for longevity and quality for something that's that affordable.
Okay.
You can get it at any Macy's, $85, something like that. Next up, Creed Royal Water. Now this one is a little bit older. This is a little like, oh, I'm on a super yacht. Ooh, something like that. It's classy, it's fresh, and it literally just looks like water. It's, in a perfectly clear bottle. And it's like, oh, this is the water that the billionaires drink.
Right.
but don't drink it.
Right.
Yeah, the analogy breaks down there a bit more. Okay, let's talk about the two big ones for this summer. They are both Louis Vuitton fragrances. The first is Imagination. Now, this was a big player last summer. Okay, I picked it up in Lisbon, in Portugal. And this is what I like to do. And I encourage everyone to do this. When you are on vacation, this could be vacation around the world. This could be vacation out of town. It doesn't matter. Anywhere that is not your home, get a fragrance or bring a fragrance and then wear it exclusively on that trip. And what you will do is you will unlock some secret part of the human chemistry
So good.
where you tie that fragrance to a specific moment in time. And because you're on vacation, it's almost certainly going to be a positive memory. And so every time I spray that, I remember climbing through the streets of Lisbon. And I wear it beyond that, but it's uniquely anchored to that memory. And it, in a way, like inflates that memory. It like charges up that memory. It adds dimension to the memory is what it does. It's like this 3-dimensional memory that I can see, but I can also smell. I guess 2-dimensional. And here's what someone wrote online about Louis Vuitton Imagination. Imagine you just got out of the ocean, head back up to your 5-star luxurious hotel and take a shower with their soap provided. You then put some cozy clothes on, linen, probably, and sit outside on your balcony. You can still smell the ocean on your skin along with the god-tier soap you just lathered with. Life is perfect.
Wow.
That is Louis Vuitton Imagination.
Sold.
And then the second one is Louis Vuitton Pacific Chill. Now, I picked this up in February in Dubai and then wore it in the Maldives. So I picked it up in winter, but I wore it in a summer climate. Haven't worn it since. This is the one that probably on the spectrum of masculine to feminine sits right in the middle. So if you're a woman, you could totally pull this off. Interestingly, my wife has said before that it is my favorite one.
Okay.
What's also interesting is the spring fragrance that you famously said smelled like deer urine. She, in the past week, has said, this is my favorite. And then also, what are you wearing?
To the same thing.
To the same one.
Oh, God bless her.
So there is something, and I wore it the other day. I wore it to, I can't remember where I wore it, but people were like, what are you, I wore it to the dentist. Yeah, my dental hygienist, and like the dentist came in and then another, what is he wearing? That smells great. I was like, oh yeah, this is Le Labo, another 13. And I was like, so I don't know what it is about that fragrance. Louis Vuitton Pacific Chill is minty, it's basil, it's fresh, light, and airy. It's got a little bit of a little tangerine in there. It's nice and fruity. Can't go wrong. So that's what we're rocking for summer. What about you though?
Well, okay, before we get to me, it's Friday afternoon.
Okay.
We're at your house.
Yeah.
It's a pool day.
Oh.
What fragrance are you wearing poolside this summer?
So, now we're going deep, okay? Somebody asked me on Instagram this week how many colognes I have, how many bottles of fragrance. I don't know. It's probably 100.
Okay.
Only about 20 are in rotation. It might be 200. Only about 20 are in rotation, about 5 per season. That's what I like. So I can stick with the same ones, but it's not so monotonous that it's over and over again. So what I like to do when I go to bed sometimes, or on days where I'm by the pool, is break out a freshie that I'm not going to keep in the regular rotation because it doesn't have the longevity. And I'm just going to like put 12 sprays on me. And it's going to be beautiful for about 20 minutes, and then it'll be gone.
Right.
Because you just feel some way after the pool.
Yeah.
That moment And feeling is also fleeting. And so I want to align that temporary moment of time with the fragrance. My skin chemistry is also unique. Like I was putting on Nishane Wulong Cha this morning, which was one of my favorite.
What are you talking about?
Spring. I said that to Mitch, and he's like, "That sounds kind of racist."
It sounds like
And I was
someone's trying to say oolong tea, but trying to make it sound like fancy.
Okay, no, you nailed it because it has a distinctive tea note.
Okay.
So this is a take on that.
Yeah.
Nishane is, according to them, and Nishane is spelled Nishane, Nishane, is, according to them, the first and only niche perfume brand out of Istanbul. So this is a Turkish perfumer, which is kind of rare, which is why they're the first and only. And then the name of this perfume, which is also very neutral, might even lean feminine, is Wulong Cha. To me, this perfume, which has outstanding staying power, I don't know if you can smell it right now, is it's like freshly rained outside in the spring. That's what it is. Fresh
There's a name
rain.
for that. Petrichor.
That's worse than Wulong Cha.
No, but that's the actual name for it. It's like the smell of fresh rain or the smell when it's about to rain. It's called petrichor.
Petrichor.
Petrichor. Petrichor.
Chor. Okay, let's go with that.
What am I wearing? I don't want to answer this question live on the show because I don't want to make you feel bad. But last time we talked about fragrances, I made a charge to you.
I know what charge you made.
And I said, can you find me an all-natural fragrance?
I know. Do you think I forgot this?
I don't know. You're a busy man.
How dare you?
Okay.
I would never forget you. So I gave this a lot of thought.
Yes. Which I assumed you would.
And what I came to was, I don't know how he would delineate like natural versus non-natural. It triggers me a little bit to even use those phrases. But again, I have to have more compassion.
Yeah.
So, but also like,
If you're triggered, check in with yourself and come back to me later.
like heartbeat is up, blood pressure is up.
Yes, feeling hot. We're talking about fragrance.
Am I the best, arbiter of that? Like I've never had any all natural fragrances.
Okay.
And so like you were leaning on my expertise, but I don't have any expertise there.
Right.
So that being said, just want you to know that I have not left you high and dry.
Okay.
And that God does have a plan.
Oh, God's plan.
And you not believing in me.
No, it's not.
No, you see, here's the thing. Every time I'm like, we're going to do this thing, you're like, you can't. And I'm a hater. That's you. And if you had just held out, what I'm saying is God's plan.
I wouldn't. You asked me the question. I
Can
wouldn't
you
have said
trust
anything.
God's plan?
I was trusting you.
I'm looking at the notes. Braid abandoned me, wouldn't make me, wouldn't get me the fragrance. Now I smell like nothing. I was not using luxurious hotel 5-star resort soap.
You know what's funny about that comment is that this has got to be a universal experience. There is something about going to a hotel, whether it's the most luxurious or the worst hotel you've ever been in, and using the soap that's in the shower. Like at our home, speaking of all natural, at our home, you wouldn't believe what our soap is made out of. It's
Actually,
like,
I don't want to know.
Yeah, it's like olive oil and beeswax and charcoal, activated charcoal. But when I go to a hotel, you think I care what's in that soap? I'm using that soap.
Oh,
no problem.
because your baseline is, we used mud from outside.
Yes. And just recently, we were on our way home from South Carolina. We're in some hotel, and I had that experience where I used the hotel soap, and I was like, I feel amazing. And it's the lowest quality soap of all time. So there's something to that.
It's my time to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That is not the world I experience. Because I always use soap.
Right. So it's just like, yeah, this is just soap.
Yeah, like we were in Disney, and I had to like open one of those like plastic little hand soapes.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is challenging.
Yeah.
Now, if you never used soap, and you're like, I'm bathing in whatever's left over.
Bentonite clay.
What's in the cast iron pan? No, just put that in here. No, that's clean. No, it's self-seasoned, as am I.
Exactly.
Nasty.
The worst part about that is that that's probably closer to the truth in our household than the other end of the spectrum. I'm happy to do a cast iron corner on this show at any time. I'm ready to talk about cast iron pans. But can we move on from the fragrances?
No, we can't, because cast iron pans, I bought a new one a couple of weeks ago.
Tough.
And I went through the process. I did the seasoning. I used it once. And then 2 weeks later, I just bought a new nonstick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got it from Made in Cookware.
Yeah.
And, they're like, look, keep this under 600 degrees. It's made with all these things. Like, you're good. I just can't get away from the nonstick.
Yeah.
It's just so much more convenient.
I'm not sure you'd find a cast iron enthusiast who is honest with you. There are some folks who are just like
deluded.
Yes. But who's honest enough to say that like cast iron as a cooking surface is better than nonstick. It takes a lot of, I have a relational equity with my cast iron
There's
pans.
intimacy there.
Yeah, there really is, to the point where a couple weeks ago, I left one on the burner when I was drying it out, because you have to dry them out because they're dumb.
Yeah.
And I left one on the burner because Asher needed my help. I got distracted and I burnt all the seasoning off. And that was the end of my night. I was having like an emotional, visceral response to.
It's like not picking your kid up at like daycare. So I forgot them at daycare.
Yeah, all of my hard work, all that seasoning, all the history, gone.
It's just, there's a lot of cooking growth happening in my life right now, and like I still need the aid of the nonstick.
Yeah. And like any high quality restaurant or chef would say the same thing, which is like at home, probably using a family heirloom cast iron pan. Cool. Love that. There's a story there. But in the restaurant, it's like, yeah, we just need this like chicken skin not to stick.
Right.
Or this egg not to stick. Yeah. Okay. Let's get this back on the rails. Next question. I noticed the recent church you highlighted that's doing well on YouTube called Cornerstone created a second channel to upload shorts to instead of doing it on the main channel. I help my church with socials and we just started uploading shorts. So I'm curious why they took this route.
All right, we're going to get really deep in the weeds here. There is a conspiracy theory amongst creators on YouTube. And when I say conspiracy theory, I'm not using it as a negative term. I'm saying it as a bunch of creators believe it to be true. YouTube has said it's not true, but nobody believes that you can trust what YouTube has to say. So the jury is out. The belief is that...
And in practice, it's hard to prove.
100%.
Right.
There are anecdotal evidence to say, look, this happened on my channel. And so see, YouTube, you're telling the truth, and YouTube would say, our internal data says otherwise. And you're like, dang, well, they probably have more data than I do. But also, their self-interests are different than mine.
Exactly.
Established accounts have not seen what you would expect on social media. When a platform releases a new feature, you invest in it, you do it because they're like, please use this new feature. If you do, you're going to see good things come from it. And we'll give you that because we want you to use it. We haven't seen that with YouTube Shorts. These established channels, like, and ours is included, dabble in it. It's like your whole channel like gets penalized, it seems.
Yeah.
And so what established channels have begun doing is starting secondary channels where their shorts happen. And it's a way of like insulating their main channel from their shorts experimentation. So if you have an account like Cornerstone with 200,000 subscribers and you wanted to get deep into shorts, then starting that secondary channel that's dedicated exclusively to shorts might make sense. If your channel is 3,000 subscribers or fewer, you don't need to worry about this. Publish it to the same channel, you're good.
And if you're an established channel, you have proven that your content that you're posting to YouTube resonates with folks. So you probably won't have a hard time growing that secondary channel if it's the same or similar content just posted in a short, vertical manner.
Maybe, but the conspiracy is that, one of the perhaps explanations of this phenomenon is that YouTube Shorts are just not watched by the audience that watches YouTube Longs.
Yeah.
And so if you start publishing the shorts to that platform, that's just not going to reach that audience. And so YouTube would just say, look, it's not for that audience. There might be another audience that would enjoy your content in a different format, but that's actually a different audience, which is interesting because this is only really true on YouTube. When Facebook, when Instagram, when TikTok introduce new features, they kind of like shove it in your face and you can't really escape the main feed. So you just kind of get used to it. Whereas on Instagram, you're like, fine, I'm just going to stay in my subscriptions tab. I'm not going to watch these shorts. And YouTube hasn't done a good job of forcing people to watch shorts because they don't want to disrupt their existing users. The other social platforms are like, you're going to like vertical videos or you're going to leave this platform. And everyone's like, fine, give me 2 years and I'll start to like it.
Yeah.
And that's great for creators, not great for users. YouTube has prioritized the users more here, which is great, but that's why creators have found some challenges.
That's interesting. Okay, let's get right back to the kitchen. I saw on Instagram that you have a Ninja Creami. That's the real name, the Ninja Creami. What recipes have worked for you?
You know the Ninja Creami.
Oh, I know it.
Ninja Creami.
You have been proselytizing it here in the office, and then just recently you posted to Instagram, and so now you're taking your promotions online. It's an ice cream maker.
Yeah, Food Corner. So Ninja is the manufacturer, and
Like the blender company.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
them. Yeah. Now they're a Creami company.
Right.
So you can really turn anything that you want into ice cream. So we got this because my wife and I have a bit of a habit, addiction, compulsion,
Okay.
of ordering Dairy Queen late at night. And thanks to DoorDash, I can have a desire, press a button, and 15 minutes later, have a blizzard in my hand.
Wow.
Blizz.
Wow.
Blizz is bliss.
It has never once occurred to me that Dairy Queen could be available to be delivered.
Yeah, I mean, you live like 30 seconds from the Dairy
I
Queen that
know.
delivers to my
I know.
house.
And if I was going to Dairy Queen, I would be a dipped cone kind of guy. So that's probably not like a delivery type.
No, they don't do that.
But like a blizzard that's
have you
going to
seen
hold
that
up.
they have a confetti dipped cone this year? It's like a birthday cake dip. Oh, I'm gonna double dip. You ever double dipped?
No.
You can ask for a double
I
dip.
didn't know it was an option.
Oh yeah, Justin. told
Like
me
for like
about
an
it.
upcharge?
Probably.
Yeah. Wow.
So I got it because I was like, okay, if we can take this ice cream compulsion and bring it into I'm not going to say healthier, but better macros world. And
It's objectively healthier, yeah.
I was like, great. So I found all these recipes and they were outstanding. So it's like, 225 mils of Fairlife milk, which is this ultra filtered type of milk where basically they disassemble the entire milk molecule and they're like, okay, now we have fat and we have like dairy goo and we have protein and we're just gonna get rid of the goo and the fat and then do that with a million molecules and now you have high protein milk, but there's no lactose. Okay, great.
Amazing.
And then like 225 mil of like almond milk, so that's no calories. Then a scoop of protein, a little bit of stevia, some salt, mix it up. Now you got like this beautiful vanilla base. And you whip it up and then you put in some mix-ins. So what do you want? What do you want to take that vanilla base and make it into?
Was it mango last night?
Well, I'll get to there.
Okay.
Don't get ahead of the story.
Sorry.
So Britt wants the Reese's Pieces in there. We mix it up. It has a mix-in function. So you finish whipping the ice cream, and then you put the stuff in, and you hit mix.
So it's not pulverizing the Reese's
right.
Pieces.
Biscoff was a great flavor. Put in 2 Biscoff cookies, 15 grams of that Biscoff butter. Love it. I made a birthday cake version where I got this like birthday cake like eyedropper. It was just like concentrated birthday cake flavor. Put like 3 of those in there. That was very good.
We're straying from the healthy place that we once began.
What are you talking about? That's 0 calorie artificial flavoring. That's just like yellow batter dye number 7. That's good for you.
What about, have you mixed in any coffee?
No, because I can't. I'm caffeine sensitive, unlike yourself, who's just obliterated his caffeine
That's right,
sensitivity
that's
and
right.
now doesn't
Right.
get any rush
Oh,
from
so
it.
it's not a late night snack for you, right?
I could not.
Right.
Will
You can do coffee ice cream in the morning.
If I have a diet soda, it's the caffeine-free one because I can't even handle that. Once a week, I go see Justin at Starbucks and I have a coffee at 4, and I feel superhuman that day.
Yeah.
But only that day.
Yeah.
And then I tried an Oreo one. And then Tumbly started feeling a little bit bumbly.
Yeah.
And this has always been my problem, is that I cannot do protein powder. So I
I didn't know that about you.
No, because it's all whey and it's just all like milk stuff. And
You have any interest in doing like a pea protein or like something like that?
I have tried every single type of protein except for one. I have tried pea, I have tried vegan, I have tried casein, I have tried whey, I have tried potato, I have tried like anything that you can pulverize into a protein, I've tried it, except for one. And I was waiting for it in the mail. So I used whey to basically work out these recipes, and they were awesome. Like these macros are crazy. You're doing 300 calories and 40 protein, and it's like ice cream. It's just ice cream. It's wild. The protein is from this company called Equip Foods.
I'm trying to rack my brain for what it could be.
It's grass-fed beef.
Yeah, that tracks.
There is an unflavored option.
How is that possible?
It is one ingredient.
It's just
Grass-fed beef.
Wow.
There are vanilla and chocolate
Sure.
options.
But
So-
the neutral option, it's got no detectable flavor.
They claim.
Right.
And it had more than 3,000 5-star reviews.
Wow.
And everyone was like, finally, my tummy isn't obliterated. And I was like, this is the messiah of proteins.
Yes.
So I get it. I whip up an ice cream and I'm like, oh, okay. Tastes like beef.
A little beefy.
Yeah, not really working there. Like, their flavors are kind of fighting each other.
Yeah.
I don't stevia and beef. Bevia, I don't know. So then I get the vanilla flavor. And I put it in and it was like, okay, this is pretty good. And then this is what happens every time. I don't know how to explain this. It's like my body lost the appetite for eating this ice cream. I could taste it and I was like, this tastes like ice cream. My body's like, yeah, you're trying to play God. You've tried it before.
Wow.
This is not real. We know it's not real. So guess what? We're going to turn off your appetite for it. And I was like, but it's Biscoff. They're like, you don't like that anymore. And I was like, dang it. So my body just says no. Thankfully, there was a backup option. And
No
that
protein.
is just making some not high protein, like
just a little treat,
Yeah.
but sugar and calories are objectively lower than
That's right.
and fat lower than what you'd get at the store.
Precisely. So that's what I made last night. Took a can of mangoes.
Heck yeah.
In a light syrup, poured it into the Creami, froze it for 24 hours. I did put in a teaspoon of stevia as well because what's sweet in liquid is less sweet when it's frozen.
Okay.
So you have to like extra sweeten it up. Whipped it up, had like a pound of mango sorbet. It was just delightful.
Love it.
So I got a pineapple in there. I've got peach in there, and I've got tangerine in there. So I'm going to try those ones as well. And hopefully that will be an option. Otherwise, this Ninja Creami, which also obliterated my wife's tummy as well, it's going to be a bust. So that's how we're doing.
Wow. It was too good to be true.
But not for most people, it
Right.
seems. Like, if you can handle whey, you can just you can play God and make whatever you want. And by play God, I don't mean like, oh, you got played. I mean like, I am God, and I am going to make food out of ingredients and molecules that should not exist.
Yeah.
Like, I am going to make low-calorie, high-protein ice cream. No, it should be, no, that doesn't work. Hey! We have the molecules.
Wow. I'm looking forward. I've heard a lot about the Creami and haven't tasted it yet. Looking forward to it. I'll try the beef one.
Now, what am I going to do with all this beef protein
I'm here for
powder
a
now?
savory ice cream. Okay, stepping out of the kitchen. Hey, Braid, I love your content and the wisdom you share around social media. It's always so spot on. I'm writing you to get some advice. I create content for a Christian school who sees social media as a platform for religious advocacy. I have been asked by the company who owns a school to put together a language policy. And I feel that just because they are a Christian school, that doesn't mean they should be pushing the Christian agenda before their educational purpose. I would love some input, if at all possible, and would like to encourage them to share their values rather than their beliefs and to avoid triggering language and word usage such as sin and repentance that could alienate members of our diverse Christian audience or even trigger debate. Thank you in advance.
Yeah, so I've given this question a lot of thought, and I'm trying to understand where this person is coming from. Because at the end, they say, I don't want to use words like sin and repentance that could alienate members of our diverse Christian audience. So I'm just not sure the context of using that type of stuff that it would like trigger a Christian audience.
It could be like touching on cultural Christianity a bit, knowing that like maybe the folks who follow their content online are cultural Christians, which is an altogether different thing from like a Christian who follows Jesus.
Sure.
It's just becoming increasingly more popular. For a great example, Dawkins just came out recently and confessed like, oh yeah, I'm a cultural Christian. Like I love Christmas. I love all these cultural things about Christianity that like add a lot of things to my life. But like, I don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God or resurrected from the dead. So it could be talking about that a little bit. This is like getting into Elevation Church territory, not wanting to use certain language to avoid triggering a certain audience. So quite the question to attempt to tackle here.
So the first thing that I wrote down is, what is the mission of this school? And how is it different from a secular school? Because my first thought was, okay, the Christian schools that I grew up around. My sister went to one very briefly. I only went to public school, but like they're like, hey, we do the same schooling, but with an emphasis on the Christian faith.
Right.
So then it would be strange if that was absent from the social media content because that is the distinctive for a comparison. If there was a certain school, as there are in the States, that have like an emphasis on certain athletics. Oh, if you have a son who's like really good at swimming or a daughter that's really good at swimming, like, and you can, like, this is the school you want to get them into.
Right.
Why? Because like they will give the opportunities that you want plus the school. You have to do school. School is like,
It's the common denominator.
right.
Yeah.
So then like,
We're
what do
doing
you want
math
to
and
emphasize
science,
on top of that? And it would be strange if like that school like hid the fact that like yeah, like we're the swimming school.
Right.
We're great at that. That's the point. That's not the bug, it's the feature. And of course, people are like, well, now you want to use language that's Christian on a public-facing page, but you didn't with Elevation. We've caught you. You're caught in the act. It's like, okay, no, let's take a step back and remember that all things are contextual. The reason that Elevation claimed that they did not want to use words like resurrection in their Easter invites is because that Easter invite to a person that's not of faith would potentially, in their view, be distancing and would be foreign and would not make sense to them. And so like they want to talk to them about those things, but they need to do it in the right place, time and place. And let's say a person did come and they're like, this is not for me. Okay, it was an hour on a Sunday, you went with a friend, you didn't go back. Okay. That is very distinct from a school that is trying to get money in large sums from presumably Christian families to send their kids to Christian schools for many, many years. There's like a big evaluation there. And so it did seem like a bit of a disconnect. It's like, hey, here's what we do. We don't want to talk about it. To the audience that would want us to talk about it, which is distinct from like making an Easter invite to somebody that has no background in Christian faith whatsoever. That being said, you make a good point. Maybe this school is like, well, yeah, we're a Christian school, but what that means is it's kind of code for like, we believe in prayer in schools and we believe in supporting all anti-abortion laws. And we believe like, if you come here, you're a conservative and you kind of know that you're a conservative when you come here. Like, hey, Republicans go to this school. Republicans teach at this school. Like, it's just code for like a certain wing of culture. In that case, that completely went past me because I was like, oh, Christian school must be Christian. But I kind of forget how like the word Christian, as we talked about with Ryan Burge in a previous episode, in the States is often used not to mean follower of Jesus, but to mean this specific sect of political ideology. In that case, then yeah, probably talking about sin and repentance wouldn't, because you're using the term differently. But I mean, if it was me, I'd be like, yeah, we should talk about things, but then also it's how we talk about things. Like, how are we saying things? Like when I think about a Christian school, I think about, okay, this is a formative period for your kids. We want them to know that they are loved and that they have a great future ahead of them. And the reason is because they were designed by Jesus and they're made in the image of God, which is very different from like, we need them to know when they're being formed that they are like worthless and they need to say this prayer and they need to dedicate their lives to God because we know once they leave this school, they might go to liberal school and they might learn that there are other worldviews and they might like never come back to the faith. And so we need to like, yes, you want people to claim Jesus, but like, are you doing it? Which motivation is underlying there? And so maybe this person who asked the question was seeing the motivation and it was kind of like a gross, ugly, dark motivation, not like a hopeful one that was like birthed like, yeah, like hope in Jesus and love in Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, there's even one more angle that I'm seeing in this question. They mention not once, but twice, like the possibility of talking about these, taking a position of religious advocacy through the school could inspire like some debate or some triggering in the comment section. And so they mentioned that twice. And another angle, I guess, that could be considered, because we don't have the opportunity to chat with this person voice to voice and hear them out a little bit more beyond what they wrote to us, is like maybe they're just hesitant to engage in that type of conversation in the comment section because it's really hard, and maybe they don't have like any experience doing that. And so they're like scared of like, I don't know how to handle the type of comment that this type of content could inspire. And so a solution to that would be like, oh, well, just maybe some like media like literacy training or like even some pastoral training to be able to, if we are going to post this type of content to our social account, knowing that it is going to trigger a certain measure of like debate or response in the comment section, how do I feel equipped as a social media manager to navigate these conversations in the comment section without just like deleting them or ignoring them? Because that's not a great posture to have as a social account online. But if we are going to open this up to conversation, how do I get equipped to be able to navigate that and navigate it well in a way that like when I come to work every day as a social media manager for school, I don't feel like just anxious about looking at the comment section?
And you know, that makes me think it might also just be as simple as what we were talking about earlier. Imagining a post where there's like, two girl students, like two 8th graders, and they're smiling, And it's like, and the comments like, oh, at Unity Christian School, a future doctor, future lawyer, future pastor, the options are endless.
Right.
No, they're not. Yes. Comment number 1, because women can't be pastors. Yeah. And then someone else is like, what are you talking about? I send my kid to this Christian school. Of course they can be a pastor. Well, you must not be a Christian then. Now you got the families fighting. And maybe that's what she means by diverse. Like, hey, we need to like dial this back and keep it real vanilla. What? Time and place. Yeah. This is not the time and place. If anything, this is going to sow, pun intended, disunity at Unity Christian School amongst the parents who are all very much aware of each other more than a public school because, hey, attendance is probably smaller here. Enrollment is smaller. And for that reason, that I understand. So many potential things here. Hopefully something we said is insightful because she did say, you're always giving great advice. Are we?
And if we didn't, feel free to write us again, email us, and we could talk through this via email too as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Next question. What are the fashion trends you're rocking for warm weather this year?
Okay, so...
where is the warm weather at, by the way?
Well...
not today.
Yeah, well, listen. This is what happens when you record the May mailbag at the end of April.
Yeah.
Like idiots. Stacked shirts is the first one. So imagine a long sleeve tee.
You came prepared.
This is a different one. That's not what I mean, but I will get to this one.
I thought that's stacked to me. You've got two shirts going on.
I'm talking about you're wearing a long sleeve tee right now.
Yes.
Now imagine a tee on top of that.
What is it, 1999? We're doing this again?
We are doing this again.
Okay. I see your stacked tees and I raise you.
No, we're not doing that.
The single shirt that appears to be a stacked tee.
Oh, no, that is the one. No. That's the one I got. Yeah, that's the one I got.
I wasn't talking about stacked polos. We're never doing that.
That's what I thought. I thought you were stacking polos again. No. That's the one I have.
It looks like two shirts, but it's one.
Well, I tried it with a long sleeve tee and a real tee, and then it gets all bunchy.
Totally.
It's too heavy.
Yeah.
So I got it. Oh, what was the brand? Oh, what's it called? It's a brand from Japan. It's a Japanese brand.
It's not Hollister.
It's not Hollister. And I got it. And I wore it. I was like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. It's the shirt that I posted on Instagram. I had two different colors. There was like the brown one and the blue one. That was one shirt. Bud.
Okay, so you get the look, but you don't get the discomfort. The question's about warm weather. You can't be wearing two shirts.
But that's perfect for right now. Like I'm not wearing a t-shirt just yet, but I don't want to wear something heavy.
Yeah.
Love it.
Love it. We have loved it. We're loving it again.
Again, the 90s are back. You will see this trend. The next is rugby jerseys. Now, this is very specific. And if you don't have a really strong base of outfits, don't get this. It's going to be too specific. It's like that one time my wife bought cowboy boots, which you couldn't assemble a regular outfit. It's like, hey, that's a bit much. Sure, they could work if you had 20 regular outfits and this was like the one different one.
Or a horse.
What's that?
Or if you had a horse.
If you had a horse, sure. Yeah. Sure, that's true. So rugby jerseys, I got this one from the same Japanese brand that I'm forgetting again. I feel like they have a number in their name. It's like Rule 78 or something. Right. I'll find it when you're talking. And it's green. It's got these fun green stripes, but it's knit, really pretty. I like that. Pop of color. This is a big one. If you are the type of person like myself, like Alex, like my wife, who wears a lot of neutrals, one of the easiest ways to introduce some color, which makes sense with the warmer weather, is just a pop of color. So my wife has a bunch of really colorful ball caps. So she's got a pink one, she's got a red one, she's got a royal blue one. And so she'll wear all of her neutrals and then she'll put on this bright colored ball cap. Now my head is too small for hats. So I can't really wear hats.
And mine is too big.
Right. But if you can, this is a great way.
Where is your pop of color?
My pop of color right now?
No, just in general. Where, if it's not a hat for you, what is it?
This is my green rugby jersey.
Okay.
It's like neon green stripes, which is fun.
What about shoes? How do you feel about the shoes being the pop of color?
So again, for my wife, a great choice. She got some pink Gazelles, Adidas. She got some blue Sambas, great pop of color. Now, I don't like being too matchy-matchy. She came down, she had a royal blue NY hat on and her blue Gazelles. And I was like, that's a little too much, too matchy-matchy. It's obvious. Okay, we don't want to match that perfectly. For me, I also got a cardigan. If you remember this cardigan, a little fuzzy cardigan. Yep. It was green with some purple on it. That was a pop of color, pushing the limits. But again, that was after I had all of my neutrals kind of locked down. Okay, here's the good one.
I couldn't believe, when I read this, I couldn't believe it.
V-neck crew necks. Not V-neck t-shirts. That is not what we're doing this season. But V-neck crew necks. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm wearing one right now. If you're listening, it's very important I make this clear. I have a white crispy tee.
That's right.
Underneath the V-neck
It's not a
crew
deep
neck.
V exposing your chest hairs and your tattoos.
Right. No chest hair. Put a tattoo there instead. Couldn't grow the chest hair. Put the tattoo in its place. So you can't see any of that. It's a pretty high collared white tee, V-neck, crew neck over top. And this V-neck, it is a knit, long sleeve, navy, but it's light. It's very breathable. So it's not too heavy for this time of year.
That's what I was doing with V-necks in 2006 or whatever. Just a deep, short sleeve V-neck. And
How deep?
like too deep.
Would you call it plunging?
I wouldn't have then, but certainly now I would refer to it as plunging. Yeah, it was not a good choice.
Okay. Relaxed jeans that stack. Okay, so we went from the skinny fit to the slim fit. We went from the slim fit to the straight fit. Now we're going from the straight fit to the relaxed fit. Now we could go from the relaxed fit to the baggy fit. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. That's the same as the skinny fit on the other side. Like we probably should have stopped at slim.
Yeah.
Skinny wasn't necessary. Probably should stop at relaxed. Baggy isn't necessary. But I'm wearing a relaxed pair of denim right now. And the importance is the length. So when we were wearing slim jeans, now this is really important. Everyone listen to this. Okay, don't miss this. Boys ask me, how do I dress? Don't miss this part. And I will tell you my embarrassing story of how I missed it. When we wore skinny jeans and slim fit jeans, the length was very important. Because it doesn't make sense to have this skin tight jean that then bunches at the bottom, looks sloppy. So we all got used to wearing the right inseam. And if you were a shorty like me, you had to get like 28-inch inseams, 30 depending on where it got measured, but usually 28, which are hard to find because otherwise you had to get them tailored. Your pants are like bunching at the bottom while they're slim.
Yeah.
That doesn't look streamlined. The opposite is true for relaxed jeans and even straight fit. Now, in fashion, and in just tailoring, there's a word called break, and it refers to how your pants stack at the bottom. So like no break means like they don't at all hit like the top of your foot and like bend a bit. Then there's a half break, which means like they're doing it a bit. Then there's a full break, and then that depends on the stack of the jean at the bottom. Am I making myself? Okay. So if you have a relaxed pair of denim, you need the jeans to stack because it doesn't look right at all to have these baggy jeans that then don't touch your shoes.
Right.
So the inverse is true. But I didn't get that. So I'm like wearing looser jeans. And of all places in the world, I'm at my favorite boutique in the fashion capital of planet Earth. I'm at Acne Studios in Paris, France. And I'm buying jeans. And the very kind person that's working at Acne, we're talking, and I'm like, I'm from Canada. He's like, Drake, right? And we're talking about music and stuff. And he's like, so the jeans, he's like, I would get a longer one. I was like, no, see, my inseam is like 28, so I have to get 28. And he's like, yeah, but like, and he very delicately and kindly put me in my place and told me like, no, you need them to stack. And I got home and my wife was like, I told you, because she'd been making fun of me for so long. She couldn't articulate what it was, but she could sense visually, if your jeans become relaxed, the inseam can't be as short as they once were. Inversely, if we ever get back to slim and tight, you don't want them to bunch and stack at the bottom.
Right.
So, have I helped you? Has this been helpful?
Immensely helpful. Yeah.
God. Okay, similarly, skinny shoes away from chunky.
We've talked about the Sambas on the show.
That's
recently.
That's right. So I don't have any Sambas myself. A bit on the nose. You know, they're very trendy. They are a girly shoe. I mean, not a girly shoe. They're like hot with the girlies.
Yeah.
So my wife has a ton. I really support her. We're entering into the gauntlet of gifts for my wife. We have Sunshine Gift May 1st of every year, which is like, hey, you made it through the winter. You don't belong in the winter. I'm sorry that you live in this part of Canada, but we can never leave truly until our children graduate and leave the house. So Sunshine Gift, you made it May 1st. Then there's Mother's Day.
Wow, less than 2 weeks after that.
Then there's her anniversary, May 19th.
Yikes.
Then her birthday, June 11th. So there's a lot of gifts in there. So I've been stacking them all up. I have the gauntlet ready, and I have some, new colors for her. She doesn't listen to the show.
No, neither.
Your wife doesn't listen to the show. It seems impossible that they would come across this. So skinny shoes away from chunky. I have a pair of Reebok Club 85s, Club C's, that I think everyone can get on board with. They're, I like a lot of Air Forces, and I still have them. And this is important. Trends come and trends go. Just because a trend is out doesn't mean like it's bad to wear it. Like skinny, there are things that are really trendy, like skinny jeans, and when they get like they fall out of favor, like it's very obvious. But like let's say Air Force Ones are like not the hot shoe, and it's Adidas Sambas. Well, you don't need to get like that exact shoe if you look really good in Air Force Ones. That being said, if the trend is away from chunkier shoes towards more of a slimmer silhouette, what silhouette of shoe might you like? And the Reebok Club C's are really inexpensive. I think even relative to Air Force Ones that might be like $110 nowadays. Famously $95 for so long, and then Nike had to up the price.
Yeah.
Club C's are like $70. So great, love those. And then just finally, some brands that I've been loving lately. About Blank, which is a British brand. A Kind of Guys, which is a German brand, and that is the brand of the crew neck, V-neck that I'm wearing right now. A Kind of Guys.
Guise.
Right.
Guys.
Space, kind, space, of, space, guys. It's worse than Pro Church Tools.
Yeah.
And then Sunflower, which is a Danish brand. And then finally, I got it. It's Rice 910, the Japanese brand. Which, okay. If you say so. Rice 910.
Yes. All right. I feel equipped.
I feel like you made it through that segment.
Listen, I'm shocked about the stacked shirts. I'm bewildered about the V-necks. But we know that these things, these trends, the fashion, it's circular. It's coming back around. One might say it's coming back around quicker than we expected it to, but it's coming back around nonetheless.
Some might say it's back in a big way.
Problem is, what are we going to do, you and I, when skinny jeans inevitably come back around and our legs, our bodies are not what they were when we were 19?
Well, we can make a slim fit work.
Right.
Like, I think even with our body types right now, like, so long as we don't put on an extra 30 pounds from where we're at now, like, we can make a slim fit work.
And that's all in the hands of the Ninja Creami.
That's right.
Yeah.
It is on the back of the Ninja Creami.
Wow.
The danger is going to be when the 2000s come back. Because, like, when I watch Seinfeld and early Friends, and they're, like, in their 90s fits, I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
Sweater vests. Thanks, Chandler. Let's bring it back. When Friends gets to the 2000s, it's like, what are we wearing?
Yeah.
And so if that comes back, now that being said, every time fashion comes back, it doesn't come back exactly as it was. It rhymes. And so it comes back and you're like, I remember something like this.
Hold on, it rhymes. Is that an original or is that from someone else?
That's George Lucas. He talks about Star Wars, how it rhymes. Yeah, it's great.
That just ended me.
Yeah, take that one. Well, good. So you made it through the whole fashion segment and you got that one nugget.
Moment. Wow. Can we just... 13th and final question for today's show, because I need to go lay on the couch and just soak in that. Last question. I was born and raised and lived in bigger cities my whole life. I moved to work at a church in 2020 to do media for them full time. Since moving here, I have adopted your church hub model. We use an app.
To be clear, the app is not my model. And
your church hub model, comma. We use an app that's unrelated.
We did not abide by your advice,
Yes. I have a single... Okay, back to our advice. I have a single QR code that directs everyone to the church hub. Back on.
Well, that's the thing. It made it seem like that was all my advice. You take two things I say, you sandwich together the biggest thing I say, don't do it.
They did you dirty. And during this journey, I've seen an increased traffic for involvement and engagement. Great. However, we don't receive much of our connection cards online since we switched. My pastor, who has grown up in the small town, makes statements regularly when things don't work that, quote, "This goes to prove my point that our church just isn't technologically savvy," end quote, and essentially blames it all on small town culture. Based on any of your data, would something like small town culture really have that drastic of a disability with technology compared to churches located in metro areas?
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, it's not that people in small towns don't have phones.
Right.
So what we do see is usually a church in a smaller town is going to be an older church. And a big part of that is not as many young people attend church. Not as many people live in small towns. So there are not as many potential young people to go to a church or to like make up a church of their own. More older people do go to church. Smaller towns would have just as many, presumably older or younger people, but if more older people go to church, then they might be able to support one or two churches in that town. And so then you might take from that, oh, our church is small town, we're not technologically savvy, when in reality, it's just that it's an older church.
Yeah.
So that would be my read on it. I also think it would be strange. In the question, they say, we've done these things positively and we've seen measurable improvements. But then you cherry pick the one that didn't improve and then say, see, we're not technologically savvy, but what about the other ones?
Right.
Are you just picking the one that didn't work and saying that proves the rule? Or is that one that didn't work just the outlier. And it means that people didn't take to the Connect cards in that way.
So without knowing how their methodology for getting Connect cards filled out, what would you suggest to make an improvement to see more connection cards filled out online for any church?
So we have the print cards, and you can find this on prochurchtools.com, Ultimate Church Connect card template. It's also on YouTube, and we have a print-ready download, and it's a card with a QR code on the back, and that takes you to the online spot. If you also want to do like printed Connect cards where people fill them out, it's worth an experiment. Like if you've tried something and it's not working, then you'd want to try for 90 days the opposite and see, or 6 months, and see if you can see any difference. And then if you have that data, be like, okay, for us, these online things worked and this didn't. To tie it back to the fashion question, every year there are new trends that come along. Some of those trends are going to look ridiculous on you. Other of those trends will look great on you. If you try the ridiculous ones, you might see, I can't wear this new clothing. It's like, well, you just tried that on, it didn't make sense. You tried this other one, it did make sense. Same thing kind of here. Like there are lots of best practices for social that I talk about that I don't employ personally because they don't make sense for our organization or my approach to digital media. So if you tried something that's not working, experiment with something else, and then you at least have data to compare. But what you can't do is point at one thing that didn't work and then infer that the opposite would work. What if both don't work? Now you have to confront that it had nothing to do with the strategy and more with something to do with the culture of the church. Or if the other offline method does work, then you can say, okay, this offline expression isn't great for us, so you need more data. It's, I would say, I'm going to say bad leadership, but like it's bad process to look at one thing that doesn't work and infer that the opposite would work if you don't have data that it does. Maybe this church already does. They have data. Oh yeah, we did. And if so, then great. Hybrid approach. That's also great also.
I think the printed Connect card with the QR code that leads you to complete the Connect card online is such a genius approach, because some of what I perceive to be the missing piece for folks filling out connection cards online is that without that printed card, sometimes, especially in smaller churches where often on a Sunday, most of the people in the room already belong to the church, the Connect card, if it doesn't have printed visibility, it remains invisible, because when you get up every Sunday to do announcements or whatever, and it's all the same people in the room, it gets tired to make the Connect card invitation every week.
I see. Great point.
You know? And so if you have something printed, it's not to fill out in printed form. It's got a QR code that leads you to fill it out online. But if you at least have it visibly, whether it's at your little welcome center, at the front door, wherever, you have something that says like, hey, fill this out. That really helps to make that next step visible in a small church where sometimes it can become invisible.
Right, because you're not getting as many new visitors, and so you're just not like talking about it as much.
If you're like, our church is in literally the shadow of Niagara's mega church. And I don't know how many new visitors Central has on a Sunday, but surely it's multiple. And for us at the little church down the street, that's just not true. And so at Central, when you get up and do announcements, it is appropriate to make a call to action to fill out the Connect card every Sunday, because there's always someone new in the room. And at the little church of 65 down the street, that's just not true. And so I can tell you from experience, when there's not new people in the room, I don't introduce myself when I get up to speak. Or I don't say, if you're new here, fill out a Connect card, because I can see you. I know you're not new here. But when there are new people in the room, I do introduce myself. Hey, welcome to church. My name's Alexander. I'm one of the pastors here. Let's open up the scriptures. If you're new here, fill out the connection card. So it's easier for it to slip through when it just, from my perspective and my experience, when it's a smaller church, when, like you said, there's just often not as many new visitors in the room.
You can type in Pro Church Tools Connect card to Google or YouTube, and you'll find our examples and templates that you can download.
Free download. Everything's free.
Everything's free.
Yeah. Policies.
You know what's not free? Your attention. We appreciate it. Thank you for your time, attention, and trust. We'll talk to you next Wednesday. So, coffee, hunting, feel free to lean into that. Now, mine are all like fashion, fitness, food, fragrance. So they all start with F. So I'm thinking about a section called F Corner. What do you think?
I think it could use a little bit more workshopping.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that.